Hello, this is Corey Andrew, and I'm joined today by Adam Lowy, founder of MoveForHunger.org. It's an organization that emerged from a really unique and clever idea, and it was a way to innovate and also address food insecurity in this country. So in 2011, Adam became a Bloom Helfand Social Innovation Fellow and was honored at the VH1 Awards for his commitment to creating social change. And in 2014, he was honored by Forbes in their 30 under 30 list in the food and drink category. Adam, welcome to Motivational Mondays.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, well, it's my pleasure. I want to begin actually with some statistics because I don't think people know numbers when it comes to food insecurity. So, 42 million people every day in this country go hungry, with 1 in 6 of them being kids. Is that accurate?
Yes, unfortunately, those are the numbers.
hmm And then when it comes to food production, what I've learned from researching you, I've learned that 35% of the food that we produce goes to waste. It's like nearly half, basically, if you round up. That's staggering as well and alarming to think that. And also, it's strange because we're supposedly the richest country in the world. So, how do you reconcile that if that's what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, food insecurity is a huge problem here. I mean, I know you mentioned 1 in 6 kids, but it touches every single population. I mean, you look at veterans, LGBTQ populations, African Americans face hunger at twice the rate of their Caucasian, non-Latino counterparts. And then when you think about food waste, we're literally throwing away perfectly good edible food all of the time. And for kind of silly reasons, if you think about it. I mean, if you go to the grocery store, I mean, the example I like to give a lot of the time is you look at the dates: best by, use by, sell by, expires on. Like, all of it's kind of nonsense if you really think about it. Food doesn't follow a date label. Food has a biological, way of going bad or spoiling, and then reducing methane, which is a pretty potent greenhouse gas emission. In fact, food waste is the number two, emitter of methane gases. And we should not be wasting this amount of food while so many are struggling. So we really started Move for Hunger as just this way to say, hey, don't waste your food, especially if it's unopened. We've got a really easy way to get it to people in need, and that's kind of how we got started here.
Yes, and I love this other part of the story because this is kind of interesting. It reminded me of like how you came up with the idea, like working for your parents, your family's moving company, and coming up with this idea. It was like Shark Tank when I thought about it. It's like, 'cause I'm always trying to figure out what is like right in front of my face, right in front of my eyes, and I haven't figured out that thing. And so you were working for your family's moving company and you realized how much food was being left behind when families are relocating. So I would love for you to share like when you had that epiphany and that like that Oprah aha moment, as you would call it, that came to you. It's amazing, really.
Yeah, you know what? We've all moved at this point, and people throw away all sorts of stuff: food, clothing, furniture. It was the perfectly good, unopened, non-perishable food that was getting left in the pantry. And honestly, customers were asking, "What should I do with this?" They were feeling guilty about it. So it started as like this way to solve this problem that you see the customer having, and like any good business, right? Like, you should be solving problems and providing better service to the customer. But it also felt like this just really nice thing to do, right? We were a moving company. We were in the home anyway. We'll pick the food up. We'll bring it to the food bank. The food bank was down the street. Like, it wasn't going to cost us much, but the reaction from the customer was like, "Oh my God, I can donate my food and it's not going to cost me anything. You've now solved me a problem." Right. And on top of that, I get to feel good because I know that I'm feeding somebody in the community. In our first month, we collected 300 pounds of food,
Wow.
and I visited my local food bank. And that's where I learned that, there were more than 100,000 people in my county that didn't have enough to eat. And if you look around Monmouth County, New Jersey, you do not see poverty or homelessness or all the stereotypical attributes that you think about when you think about hunger. But it exists here as it exists in every community. And um, education, having my eyes opened was kind of like that first step in saying we should do more and others can do more. Um, I knew nothing about nonprofits at all. And, if you'd asked me 13 years ago if I'd be running a nonprofit, I would have told you you're out of your mind. But as I've, dove into this industry, I've really learned that nonprofits are about problem solving. And the best way to do that is to leverage resources that already exist.
Hmm.
So with the moving industry, you've got trucks and drivers and warehouses. And if you look at the food banking industry, they've got trucks and drivers and warehouses and a lot of the same struggles. And what we did was take this industry and put them to work. And today we've got 1,100 movers across the US and Canada that are recovering food as part of their operations. They're making food recovery business as usual to feed the communities they serve.
Wow, that is fascinating. So you had to connect dots with other people, and that's like what's well, other industries, I should say, to make this bigger dream really work. And that's what I think is also so tied into what we talk about here at the NSLS as a leadership conversation, because leaders have to often, if they have a vision, they have to convey that to others, to inspire others to get involved in that vision, to bring it to life. So in this case, you have other moving companies, corporations. You have to coordinate them going to pick up the food here and there. It becomes like a whole operation across the country. So how do you actually connect those dots? I mean, is it like you have to re-refrigerate trucks now, so when they go up, they can keep the non-perishables fresh? Like, did you have to really innovate in that regard as well?
Logistics is definitely always challenging, and it's probably one of the reasons why there's nobody else that does things exactly the way that we do. But at the same time, we try to keep things simple, right? Because if you overcomplicate things, no one wants to participate. So for our moving partners, what we did was we created materials that could market and educate their customers about how to participate. Please donate your food when you move. This inherently then becomes the movers program. They're there, they pick it up, they bring it back to their warehouse, and once a month they bring it to the local food bank. When we started, everything was unopened, non perishables. So you did not need to worry about refrigeration or food safety or anything like that. And it's really only just the past couple of years, because of the pandemic, that we've dipped our toe in fresh food recovery. That's not coming from the customer side, but instead working with big farms or distribution companies, or thinking about how can we get pallets of food, to get to where it needs to be. And in that case, yes, we're looking at refrigerated trucks, cold blankets, cold storage. Really, again, looking at what are the logistics of getting food from point A to point B and doing it in a way that ultimately point B is the people that actually need it.
Yeah. You mentioned when it comes to the idea of expiration dates and keeping things beyond the expiration date because they actually can still be consumable. It reminds me of when I worked in restaurants, my younger days, and I was terrible at it. So it was short lived. Believe me, I did give it a shot. But one of the most frustrating things I remember was at the end of the night. I mean, the food that we tossed out, and I mean, the unused bread. So there would be like just I don't even know how many cases of bread that we had baked, um, and had to toss out at the end of the night. And I remember we all were like, "Well, can't we give it to the homeless? Can't we X, Y, Z?" And we were always told things like, "Well, there's a liability," and we were told this story that I think may be like a myth at this point, but apparently a homeless guy was given a meal from a restaurant, and and he got sick, and so he sued them for millions, and now no one else will get involved. I don't know if that's folklore, but I heard that story. But do you find that there is a concern, or is that a real thing, a liability of what if you are providing meals and there is a contaminant?
Yeah, so there's little truth to that, but I will say there's a nugget of truth, right? So there's been a good Samaritan law on the books for a very long time, which basically means if your intent was to actually help somebody, you cannot get sued for that, especially when
Mm,
it's about giving food and donations of food. Now, the nugget of truth is a number of different cities and municipalities across the country have, in some cases, made it more challenging to donate some of that food.
mm,
So, for example, in New York City, you need to have nutritional facts on that. So, if a baker wanted to donate bread and there were no nutritional facts on that because it wasn't wrapped and labeled,
mm,
they wouldn't be able to donate that. So, very often we see that bread, unfortunately, just go in the trash.
mm,
Now, I think what we want to get to is a point where if we can't donate it, how can we ensure that it doesn't end up in a landfill, right? So, can we compost it? What are the other ways that we can kind of think about reducing food waste in those cases? And I'd say
mm,
most really good chefs, they care about that because that is cost. the average American family of four wastes $1,200 in food a year.
Mm,
It's real money, right?
yeah.
And then you go to the restaurant level or the grocery store level, like no one wants to be wasting food. Every bit of food you waste is, dollars off of what you could be making in revenue.
Hmm.
So not only is it the right thing to do to be reducing food waste, but it's the smart and economical thing to do. And I'd say it's really just been over the past couple of years where we've started to see this movement in terms of food waste reduction. I've been very excited to see new standards happening, coming out hopefully in the next couple of years on date labels, new technologies that are going out there, new composting abilities. There's a lot of cool technology happening on that side of things. And my hope is consumers are going to get excited about this because hopefully it will save them money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that again, people are going to be really, well, if they do the research, if they do the research and see how much need there is for feeding people. I mean, I was shocked to find out how many people, and it just seems like it's so frightening because now prices are even going up. So I'll go to the grocery store and I'll see families making these decisions about basic things.
Yeah, it's you're going to pay rent or buy medicine for yourself, or are you going to put food on the table for yourself or your kids? Like these things were happening way before the pandemic. The pandemic exacerbated those, and those that were struggling before were hit doubly hard. And now you have this whole supply chain crisis where everything is going to go up, 10, 20, 30%, especially food, while wages have virtually remained stagnant for a very long time. Everything has gone up, wages have remained the same. And when we think about hunger, hunger is actually a symptom of poverty, which is a very complicated problem. But you're not going to solve hunger unless you address people getting paid a little bit more and bringing down the costs of those basic things that people need to survive.
Yeah, and it seems like that's a continuing debate that it's exhausting to even watch. I'm like, why are we still having that debate? Because it's basic math, really. It's not,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like we're asking anyone to really like kind of work out like some strange like uh, equation that's like from like a calculus book or something. I mean, it's pretty like you just said, if the price of the food goes up, how can that same amount of salary pay for that food? So hopefully we can find some resolve with that eventually. But I do want to ask as well, I know that when it comes to forming this company, as with all companies, you start out with a good idea, you're like, okay, we're going to do this, and then you might hit some missteps and you may falter or do things that maybe didn't work out. Can you share some of the obstacles that maybe you had when you first began?
Oh yeah. I mean, I still make mistakes 13 years later, and I think that's part of your growth journey, right? Anytime you're kind of getting started out. I mean, I know when we started, I reached out to a company and, I just saw that they were a big company. That's all I knew. And I asked them for $100,000 without doing any research, without looking if they are giving to any other organizations, if they even had a philanthropic program there. And we were working with a couple of their partners, and they basically said cease and desist. You can't just come and ask us for like, are you a joke? Basically, the president of that company ended up later coming to meet me and my family in New Jersey, joined our board of directors. He didn't give me the 100K, he gave me $10,000, but introduced me to everyone in the industry because he was the president of a major moving van line, we Worldwide Moving. And for me in that moment, those introductions were more valuable than any amount of money he could have given. That was credibility. In terms of the other stuff, while our programs have been going for a while and we've launched some new ones, like just because something's going well doesn't mean that it can't be better. So we are constantly iterating on everything that we do, whether it be in-person events. We had to pivot to virtual events during the pandemic. People had less food to donate in some cases. All the supply chain issues that people faced hit us too because we work with trucks and movers and thinking about all those things. So we had those challenges and we tried a lot of things that didn't work, and you stick with the things that do. And I think that's how you grow and how you learn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when it comes to this particular CEO you're mentioning, though, I am curious, what was the problem with was it how you approached them? There's a protocol in type that you there's a protocol at play that you didn't follow, that you didn't know about? So you just were like, "Hey, I'm Bob.
Yeah,
Send me
we
a
were
check."
we were working, so they have moving agents all across the country. We were working with a handful of their agents in their marketing team, and it became time where I said, "Hey, I think we need to go bigger here, right? I think we want to expand." So I just kind of reached out. It was my first time contacting the president, and my first ask was $100,000. And again, what I learned from that moment was you need to do research before you make a pitch, right? You can't just go and ask somebody for money. And also, in retrospect, money wasn't the ask that I should have been making from him at that point. We were only several months into our little pilot with 5 different locations across the country. Um, yes, $100,000 would have been pretty significant, but again, learning that not nearly as significant of him making the introductions and the rounds and saying, "Hey, these guys are a legitimate organization and you should get involved." Um, so yeah, I mean, do your research, especially if you're coming from a place where you are an NGO. You got to look at what is the charitable giving history. What are they doing around employee engagement? What are their marketing goals? And does their brand align with what you're doing? Because you could have the best cause in the world, but if it doesn't make sense, they might be giving to someone else, and that's a better fit for them. I say it all the time. I said it earlier about leveraging resources, right? Um, there's a lot of companies that are like tackling a lot of different causes. So, for instance, like, would it make as much sense for the moving industry to be tackling financial literacy? Probably not, right? But a bank has a lot of those resources in place already. So you should hopefully see more banks tackling that issue because it's a major issue. And it wouldn't cost them a lot of extra. And hopefully, it might even lead to more people opening bank accounts. So when you can create that cycle of doing good, also being good for your business, companies will be more likely to participate in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because financial literacy has come up a lot in recent interviews here on Motivational Mondays. I had the former CEO of Ameritrade, and we were discussing how that's a passion of his because it begins with even, he'd like to see it start in the elementary school level or the junior high school level, teaching kids the basics of like, this is more than just a credit card. It can ruin your life. So,
Yeah.
you know, here's what an APR looks like. Here's a percentage range you might not want because you'll be just paying off the interest. I mean, and they'll, it's funny. Those are things that most of us don't know. And I know I got in trouble in my early 20s because of that. And it's
We
a
didn't learn
catalyst for a
any
lot
of
of
that.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely, and to you, so and the point you're making is there's a connection between learning from the beginning about how to have financial health and then how you move forward in maintaining your existence.
Absolutely. It's all connected. You need all of those things. We talked about getting yourself out of the cycle of poverty. You can't do that without education.
Yeah.
Food banks and the work that we do, we are one small part of this larger equation to think about how we give people the resources to be able to live, fulfilled lives where they're not worried about just their next paycheck.
Hmm. I wonder if, with all you're doing, and I know at this point, I believe the number was 26 million pounds of food, if I'm not mistaken, thus
Hmm.
far you've delivered, which comes to, I think, was 22 million meals. I'm trying to remember my numbers there.
Yes, sir.
Um, That sounds like a lot. Now, is that enough to actually reduce the percentage of the poverty, or are we just sort of in real time feeding people who are hungry in real time, but not reducing the actual situation?
I mean, we're definitely not reducing the situation with what we're doing yet, right? Like it takes a lot more than that, and we've become kind of partners with all the food banks and pantries that we're providing this food to. I'll say the difference I feel that we're making is we are educating millions of people every year that did not sign up for a food bank's mailing list, right? If you happen to be moving, you're going to learn about what hunger is in your community and how to help. And whether you donate food with us or not, you're going to be much more likely to, participate or donate or actually care about the cause in the future because your eyes have been opened. The other big shift I think that we're making is on the corporate end. We're getting not just consumers to care, but these companies to care. Companies like Mayflower, Allied Van Lines, or on our property management program, Graystar, Equity Residential, Bell Partners. I mean, they're now part of their social media strategy includes statistics about hunger and food waste. Like if we didn't exist, they wouldn't be pushing that out there to their residents and prospects and all these things. So you're creating this shit, this educational and awareness shift and saying these issues are important to us. And then when they go and do other things around sustainability or food waste or community, they're going to incorporate this stuff into there as well. It's not just about Move for Hunger. It's about getting people to care. You got that's the first step. If we shut our doors tomorrow, we know that we've got a few thousand companies that care about this work and will hopefully continue in some way, shape, or form.
I love your story and thank you for doing it because it is something that is just it's humanity at its best that someone would create a network like this to make sure that other people who they don't know, strangers, just have basics to survive. So thank you for that. And thank you for joining us today on Motivational Mondays.
Thank you for having me.